Hello and welcome to the first episode of our winter podcast. We're going to be doing these on a weekly basis, and one thing that we're going to be doing with these is, let's say if there's a major winter storm that's coming towards the mid-Atlantic, northeast, southeast, eastern half of the nation. What we're going to do is that we're going to have them more frequently when we have a major winter weather event happening. But this, on a normal basis, this will be a weekly thing that we try to do, and we're going to do the best that we can to get these out. Does take a lot of work, a lot of effort, a lot of energy. So please bear with us, bear with me as I push these out. But what we're going to do today is, and what we're going to do with these podcasts is, we're just going to go over the pattern for the next couple weeks and what we see is potentially happening. I actually was supposed to do one a couple weeks ago that was actually recorded but never posted. So it's amazing that my forecast for that point would have proven right had I actually posted. So without further ado, what we're going to do, we're going to examine the GFS model, and we're going to do that because that's the model last year that did the best. So what we're going to do is we're going to focus on that model one. Okay, so let's go right over to our screens. Okay, let's see, there we go. So these are pretty much the current conditions that you're seeing now. The rain that we had from Nicole, the storm system has pushed up and moved off further to the northeast and into Canada. Now, what I want to really point out to you is the cold air. There's a cold front that's coming through the northeast and the mid-Atlantic tonight, and this is going to bring a pattern change. We've had a ridge in the east, a little bit of a trough in the west, and it's been cooler than average in the west and warmer than average in the east. And what I was thinking for around late October is that we will see a pattern shift around mid-November, and that's kind of what we're seeing now. And I'm going to explain to you why this feels a little bit strange based off of what we're seeing here, because you don't really see that phasing, what's about to happen, phasing with the NAL, AL, and the PNA. But for some people who like cold and like snow, they'll take this. Now, the models have backed down significantly off of a snowstorm that originally was posting later in the week for areas in the northeast, but this is also a La Nina year. So a lot of these storms that you're going to notice, they're going to show up on the model as these big super storms, but they're going to ring out, they're going to be dry. And I feel like we're going to have some of those specifically this year. But for now, let's move forward in the time lapse. You can see the areas of New England as the low pressure system rides up this cold front that's coming through. It's going to redevelop off the coast, and you're going to see some light to moderate rain up into New England and into Maine. And it's actually going to turn into probably one of the first major snowstorms as the cold air catches up to it, and the energy from the original low pressure system up in Canada transfers down to this storm off of the coast. And you'll see areas of Maine and Vermont and New Hampshire get some of the first snows, and some of your first lake effect snows you're also going to see. This is just a peek into how cold this air is. The 540 line is, depending on the time of year, is usually a good indication of how cold it's going to be. And during the winter, sometimes it's the indication of where your freezing line is. Not necessarily the case this time. It's also a good indication sometimes of where the rain-snow line will be if there was a storm system coming through. So just keep that in mind for future references. We're going to go to, this is hour 48, and you can see that we're having a little bit of a storm system develop. You could be having your first snows in areas of Oklahoma this upcoming week. I don't expect it to add up to much, maybe an inch, 2-3 inches at most, but I don't expect it to add up to much. It might be more of a mixed event then you have a thing of a major snow system, and I don't expect that. However, um, it's going to be cold in the east. However, it's not going to be as cold as it will be. Okay, if that makes sense, because what's about to happen is that this storm system right here is going to actually drag in more cold air. But you can tell that how cold the air is because you look at the Appalachian Mountains as this little disturbance, and it doesn't really develop like it was doing with the storm earlier in the week, and it was giving a nice little swath of snow up into areas of Pennsylvania and Ohio. It's not doing that here, but you see a little bit of mixed activity in the mountains and into Tuesday, and you might have some rain mixed with some snow even in some of the big cities. That's what a few models earlier today said. Not so much now, but it's possible because the cold air will be that cold. And it's just going to be a really elongated low pressure system. And you can tell, look at all the light snow. This is just light conversational snow that is showing up here into the areas of the Midwest. This is as we head into late Tuesday night around 12 o'clock-ish, early Wednesday morning. The storm continues to move off the coast, redevelops, and you can have some more snow up in New England. But here's the main feature. Look at all the cold air. This is some really cold air for this time of year. Most average high temperatures around 60 in the mid-Atlantic. We're talking about temperatures with this that won't get out of the 40s, and maybe not even out of the low 40s for some areas. You're talking about some 30s as you head into the Northeast and the Midwest, which is much below average. And look at the West. There's that ridge developing in the West as this cold air comes down. And you can see the storm really wraps up. You get a nice little snowstorm up there in Maine, and as you head up into Canada. And lake effect snows will, as you head into Thursday, be a more persistent thing. It's because of the cold air that you're going to be receiving. So, now what I find interesting is as you continue to go through, you can see how deep this cold air goes all the way down into the south. And it sinks down the south. And you can tell the southern jet, there's moisture and there's rainfall coming up and through it, but it can't really develop into anything. And that's the typical sign of a La Nina, because the northern jet and the southern jet don't really work together that much. You can see the cold air continues to persist, and you get another reinforcing shot of cooler air. It won't be as cold as you head into Monday of next week, Monday the 21st, and it's now turns into a more seasonable type of cold as you head on into the later, and as you get farther into the model lines, like after 240, you can't really dig too deep into what's going to happen. But what I like to look at is trends. What are the models showing consistently? Okay, what are they consistently showing as it pertains to weather patterns? We're not looking for storm placement, things of that nature, but is it going to be a colder pattern? Is it going to be a zonal pattern? Is it going to be a warmer pattern? That's kind of what we're trying to look out for. You can see another batch of really cold air coming down from Canada. It looks dry. A lot of the forecasts, especially in the east, looks dry. You have some storms moving into the west, and you can see that perhaps if this pattern occurs the way it looks, you have a pattern shift as you head into late in the month of November into early December, and it gets really warmer than average in the east. We'll deal with nice snows and a lot of rain in the west. And one thing that I will say is when you start getting storms in the Pacific Northwest, look for it to get warmer in the east. That's what I will say. I'll explain that in a later video. Now, here's why I say this is all interesting, the cold air that's going to be coming in here for about the next 10 days. When you look at the NAO, usually to get a sustained time of cold air, you need a negative NAO. And as you can see, maybe around the 15th of November, the NAO might go negative. That's where it's trending. But then it goes positive. And by the end of this spectrum, that will be around December 1st. Starts going, looks like it might be trending negative again. But for the most part, it's staying positive. It will be positive through this time where we're cold, which is really, really interesting It's just really interesting in general that we have this cold air, and then you think about the AL, which usually works in. You look at both of those, and usually when they were both working together, you usually get cold, you get snow, you get all that type of thing. Not this day, not this time. The AL will be trending negative, but it might not. The mean is not going to doesn't even project to be negative till early December. And when you think about that, that's when we're talking about perhaps another pattern shift to where we'll be warmer in the east and more precipitation in the west. Let's look at the PNA real quick. The PNA, usually what you want for cold air in the east, you want the PNA to be positive and the NALs and the AL to be negative. That's not happening here. It's more so neutral to slightly negative for the PNA. It's just not a typical pattern based off of these indexes, but it's also not typical to have three line units in a row. So with that said, I hope you enjoyed this first podcast that we had today. One of the main factors that we're going to be looking at is that there's some opportunities for a lot of lake effect snow showers, and areas of New England will have some of their first snows and some first real snowstorms type of things to move up into the areas of the Northeast. There's going to be unseasonably cold in the east, and it will be a fairly dry pattern, moving forward over the next 10 days, and then a potential pattern shift as you head into late November and into December. So that's all we have for you today. If we have anything different, you'll see it as a regular post on our website, and we'll post little extra videos here and there as well. Thank you guys for watching this, and I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day and a wonderful week. Stay warm.